This is where the famous statement was made by the Nabi of Allah, that if my daughter Fatima committed theft, I will cut off her hands. The Sahaba say that when we used to look at the face of the Nabi of Allah, if there was anything that was out of line, the Prophet of Allah to speak about, or anything that was against haya, modesty, we could see that the Prophet of Allah was more shy than a virgin girl. The Sahabi did not move. Said like this, the bird is deceived, not knowing that this is a living being. It thinks it is a statue. What respect? And the Nabi of Allah stands there alone. And then he reads the one share of his life. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. لقد جاءكم رسول من أنفسكم عزيز عليه ما عنتم حريص عليكم بالمؤمنين رؤوف الرحيم صدق الله العظيم. Surah Tawbah, Surah number 9, verse 128. Translation, verily there has come unto you a messenger. It grieves him that you should receive any injury or difficulty. He is anxious for the believers, full of pity, kind and merciful. Sadaqallahul Azim. Who says that the Muslim Ummah is spiritually weak? One statement that we are starting a program about the life of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so many people have come together. Our vessel has drifted 1400 years away from the life of the Nabi of Allah. But still the name of the Nabi of Allah unites us. We're doing pretty well. Do not be demoralized. We were the trendsetters and the heroes 200-300 years ago. We can return back by drawing inspiration from the greatest legacy that Allah Almighty sent to planet Earth. We were studying in the morning, myself and the group of brothers, that the tafsir program, it completed 15 years today. So we did a tafsir program for 15 years in Holland Park Mosque. The question is, why shift into the seerah? Because we have not completed the Quran. There's still 12 juz left. So why are we shifting to the seerah of the Nabi of Allah, the life of the Nabi of Allah? Studying the community and being a part of the community for so many years, I find that my beautiful brothers, sisters, viewers find it difficult to practice the deen. They find it difficult to come in the morning and establish their prayer. They find it difficult to wake up in the morning. They find themselves on a crossroad. Their iman is challenged. Their faith is challenged. The society in which they are born, the society in which they are living, is challenging them every second of their life. So I thought about it and I said that there have been great personalities in the past, and we come to know of their love story. Romeo and Juliet, Layla Majnoon. We've heard these stories, And we find that when a person loves somebody, it doesn't matter what the task is. The task becomes easy. But if a person does not have that love, then it becomes hard to fulfill the task. I find in my counseling life, counseling people, when the muhabbat is ripped from the relationship, the smallest thing aggravates both. It can be something so qaleel, so saghir, so small and little, but they will fight over it. But when two people are in love, it doesn't matter what it is, a person will forego. He will accept it and he will move on. Now, there is no doubt that no person from the creation of Allah Almighty has been loved more than Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is a sign all these youngsters have arrived today because of the Nabi of Allah. They want to learn about the life of the Nabi of Allah. What are the lessons from his life? But there are two types of love. One is love that comes through the spiritual line, through faith. All Muslims have that love. But it has to coincide with the intellectual love. It's very important. There has to be intellectual love as well, where the mind is satisfied that he is the greatest. And the mind is satisfied that there cannot be a greater legacy than his legacy. Once the mind is satisfied with the legacy of the Nabi of Allah, then the love of the spirit and the love of the intellect coincides, it comes together. Then it becomes easy for any hukm to be fulfilled. So we find that youngsters, old and young, sometimes come with criticisms about the Nabi of Allah. They have criticisms about the Quran. The reason is, by faith they love Allah, and by faith they love the Nabi of Allah, but intellectually they have not been satisfied. That's why the questions come. That's why a person criticizes. So my aim, we have many great scholars. I'm a very small person. I don't feel that I am befitting this position to speak about the Nabi of Allah. So I'm a naqil. I'm going to only relate, nothing from my side. I don't have the ability. I feel very shy to speak about Nabi Kareem Muhammad from start to end. I don't even consider myself a student. I'm a student. Forget about a teacher. There are great personalities in the world that have spoken about the Nabi of Allah and have written about the Nabi of Allah. My aim from this program, that may go on for 1, 2, or 3 years, is to instill the love of the Nabi of Allah in your heart. To satisfy your intellect. That your mind is satisfied that there can be no better person than Nabi Kareem Muhammad, and your heart is inclined towards the Nabi of Allah. That is my maqsad. That is my purpose. If we can basically achieve that, Alhamdulillah. Allah Almighty allow this program to be qabool, and Allah Almighty allow this program to open our hearts towards the ittiba and the ita'at of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, when we speak about the rights of people, so tonight and maybe next program will be an introduction. And then the 3rd week from now, we will start the family tree of the Nabi of Allah, and then draw stories from that. But tonight is about Nabi Kareem Muhammad and his rights upon us. What rights does he have upon us? And why does he have those rights? And why should we love him? We're going to try to capture all that in the half an hour that we have of tonight. So scholarship has studied the Nabi of Allah from start to end, and they've come up with a few things that we need to be aware of. The first haqq, the first right that Nabi Kareem Muhammad has upon us is that we believe in him. That we believe in him as the Nabi of Allah. Now, when we say that we believe in him as the Nabi of Allah, that basically demands that we accept everything that he said and he did. Because we believe that whatever he said and whatever he did is directly controlled by Allah Almighty. So if there's anything that we study in the life of the Nabi of Allah, you come across something that you study that does not sit well with your intellect, the first thing is you believe in it. And then once you believe in it and you say that this has to be right, then you approach a scholar. Then you approach a person that is well versed, that can satisfy your intellect. But the first step and the tartib is you accept it first, that this is the Nabi of Allah. Subtle hint, the Nabi of Allah married Hazrat Aisha Siddiqah. He married her when she was young. Now the intellect does not accept this. We'll speak about this later on in our tafsir, in the seerah program. But what we need to do is that this is the Nabi of Allah. He is the most perfect human being that Allah Almighty created. And his life and his choices and his decisions and his pattern of life is the most perfect pattern of life. I may not accept it intellectually. I cannot satisfy my intellect. Because in the environment that I live in, it's not possible. But there has to be some reason behind it. And whatever reason it is right. So we believe in the Nabi of Allah, number one, that he is the Nabi of Allah. And the Nabi of Allah, in all that he has done and all that he has left behind, is perfect. Number two. This number two haqq has been made mention in the Quran many a times. You can hear the echo of this command not once but multiple times when reciting the Quran from cover to cover. And that is Ati'ullah wa Ati'ur Rasul. Obedience to the Nabi of Allah is his right. So just like a husband and a wife, parents and children, teacher and students, employer and employee, there are rights. My wife can hold me responsible if I don't fulfill the rights. And I can hold her responsible if she does not fulfill my rights. The Nabi of Allah can hold us responsible. The first responsibility is to believe in him. And I've given a small understanding pertaining to this. And the second is ita'at, that we try to emulate him. We try to be like him in our outward position, and we try to be like him inside. For that we need to have knowledge, and that's why we're going to study the seerah. Number three, the religion that he brought, that is known as the Kamil and Atam Deen, we help it and we assist it. In tansurullaha yansurkum wa yuthabbit aqdamakum. And amazing, this verse is in Surah Muhammad, the surah that is named after him. And it's Surah number 46, verse number 7. Allah Almighty says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tansurullaha yansurkum wa yuthabbit aqdamakum. That assist the deen of Allah. Assist the deen of Allah that was brought to you by the Nabi of Allah, and he bled for it. He lost his relatives for this. He lost his homeland for this. He lost his peace of the day and the night for this. He gave up everything for this deen. If we believe in him and we emulate him, then we need to do exactly the same for this deen. We need to be good ambassadors. That's number three. Number four, respect. Respect the Prophet of Allah. Ta'zeem and takreem. Now, in this program, we're going to mention the Nabi of Allah many a times. Try to make it your habit to say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Try to make it your habit to say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I was reading something amazing. Ta'zeem and takreem of the Nabi of Allah. One person said to me 2 weeks ago, he said, what is the maqsad of your program of seerah? I made mention that we want to instill the love of the Nabi of Allah. But through this program, we want to really develop the temperament of the Nabi of Allah. This is very, very important. The temperament, the mizaj of the Nabi of Allah. Now let me draw your attention so you can understand. You're very intelligent, boys and girls. If a person has anger, you must have heard this. If a person has anger, what dhikr works tremendously to put out the anger? Durood. True? Have you heard that before? If a person has anger problems and he goes to a spiritual doctor and he says, I've got an anger problem, tell me a dhikr to recite that will allow me to control my anger or will allow the anger to drop in intensity, they will tell you to recite durood. Even in the Arab countries till today, if somebody's fighting, what do they say? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Why do they say that? Now, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad is salutations upon the Nabi of Allah. The athar of this salutation is it allows you to cool down. This is a direct interpretation of the mizaj of the Nabi of Allah. He was cool, calm, collected. He had a very Rahim and Kareem personality. I find that this is something that is missing in the Ummah. We have lost that Raham. We have lost that Karam. We have become very, very similar, as the Nabi of Allah indicated to the Yahud, that we are following the Qanun, the law, but we have forgotten the purpose of the law, the maqasid of the law. The Raham has been ripped out of us. So it's very important that through this program, Ta'zeem and Takreem of the Nabi of Allah, we recite salutations upon the Nabi of Allah, and a side window gives us an indication that salutation in itself, the athar of it, the benefit and the perk of it, can give us an understanding the mizaj of the Nabi of Allah, that he was very, very Rahim, very cool, calm and collected, not very emotional. Collectively, we are very, very emotional. Collectively, we are very, very emotional. The slightest, the smallest thing can trigger us off. Slightest and the smallest thing can trigger us off. And the last one, that is the most important one, why we have started this Seerat program, is the muhabbat of the Nabi of Allah. These are the 5 rights of the Nabi of Allah upon us. So Iman in the Nabi of Allah, the Ita'at of the Nabi of Allah, the Nusrat of the Deen of the Nabi of Allah, the respect of the Nabi of Allah, and the muhabbat, the love of the Nabi of Allah, are the 5 rights of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, if we were to study relationships, and if we were to study relationships of intense love and muhabba, we'll come to know that it is human nature to be drawn towards somebody that has 3 characteristics. So I'm going to say very quickly and then we're going to elaborate upon this. Kamal, Jamal and Ihsan. Kamal, Jamal and Ihsan. This has never changed from the time of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam till today. And these will be the same 3 characteristics till the day of judgment. If a person has Kamal, or he has Jamal, or he has Ihsan, he will draw the positive emotions of another person. He will be a magnet. Simple. Kamal means perfection. Jamal means beauty. And Ihsan means favor and kindness. These are the 3 characteristics that allows a person to be the center of attention, to be the person of the town, to be the mahbub of so many. Now let's try to study the Kamal and the Jamal and the Ihsan of the Nabi of Allah. So we are trying to, I know we all love the Nabi of Allah, we're trying to intellectually satisfy our mind and allow our mind to love the Nabi of Allah. So the mind and the heart, because these are the 2 things. This is what we need to focus upon, the heart and the mind. If these 2 things come together and they find themselves on the same platform, then the task becomes easy. So that's why they say that the mind is the vessel of knowledge and the heart is the vessel of emotions. And the knowledge controls the emotions. कि ये इल्म का बर्तन है और ये एहसासात का बर्तन है. ये इल्म का, ये एहसासात का. This is the vessel of knowledge and this is the vessel of emotions. We need this and this to unite and to have a very strong relationship when it comes to loving the Nabi of Allah. Now, so the first one was what? Kamal. Perfection. If you find somebody that is perfect, a lot of youngsters that are sitting here who love soccer, they love Ronaldo. They love Messi. Why? Are they better looking people than us? They have attained perfection in a sport. So in the whole globe, there's 8 or 9 billion people. These are the best 2 or best 3 people to kick a ball into a net. So automatically all the youngsters, because this is human nature, there's a human chip inside everyone, that wherever they see Kamal, perfection, you are drawn towards that Kamal, the person with Kamal. It doesn't matter if it is sports. It doesn't matter if it is business. It doesn't matter if it is any sphere of life, any facet, any faculty of life. So let's study Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as a perfect human being in different faculties of life. So number 1, generosity. If one person is very generous and he's a giver, you will find inside you positive emotions to love that person. What are we trying to do? We're trying to satisfy this now. If somebody is generous, if somebody comes today and gives you $1 million, somebody comes today and gives you $1 million, will it be hard to love the person or easy to love that person? Pretty easy. So one person gives you even half of a million. He gives you $500,000. It's easy to love that person. If anyone speaks ill of him, will you defend him? If he asks you at 3 o'clock in the morning to leave your bed and come to him, will you go to him? He's giving you $500,000 and he calls you at 3 o'clock in the morning and he says, come to my house, leave your cozy bed. Will it be easy for you to do that? Yes. Because he has shown generosity to you. Now let's try to think about the generosity of the Nabi of Allah. If we look through human history in our literature, the person that was known for generosity is Hatim Tai. Hatim Tai. He died before Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. His son, Adi bin Hatim, he accepted Islam. So he's a legendary chief of the Tai tribe. And he was known for his generosity. He was known for his generosity. He is the person, the personality, the picture, the symbol of generosity is Hatim Tai. Now let's try to compare him with the Nabi of Allah. Let's try to understand the generosity of the Nabi of Allah so we can be satisfied here. Hatim Tai gave to his friends. Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave to his friends and to his foes. The Prophet of Allah gave that benefited the external and benefited the internal. True. His giving benefited the external as well as the internal. The Prophet of Allah has left and we're still benefiting. Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has left. He's buried in his grave. But we are still benefiting. Everyone is benefiting. And they will keep benefiting till the day of judgment. His generosity is not only limited to this temporary world. His generosity will be seen in full view on the day of judgment. When his generosity will come to rescue so many from the qahar and the ghadab and the anger of Allah Almighty. And what a beautiful statement that you'll find in Mishkat. Man taraka daynan fa'alayya wa man taraka malan faliwarathatihi. How can you find a more generous person than that? Man taraka daynan fa'alayya. If a person dies and he has a loan and he has a debt, family members come to me, I will pay off the debt. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ مَالًا فَلِوَرَثَتِهِ. And if he has wealth and he leaves wealth behind, distribute the wealth. I have nothing to do with it. The ghina of the heart. The ghina of the heart. Many a times, he did not have anything. People used to knock on the door. He had nothing at home. But what he used to do is, he used to take a loan from somebody to address the need of the person that is knocking on the door. And that's why they say, مَا سُئِلَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم شَيْئًا قَطْ فَقَالَ لَا. He never ever said no. He never ever said no to anyone. Anyone who came to him with a need, he used to respond positively. And that's why the poets of the time, they said the only time we heard, this may be an exaggeration, but the only time we heard the word La from the mouth of the Nabi of Allah was Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. He never said La other than Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship but Allah Almighty. Have you heard the word Noshirwan? The Persian king. So when we read our literature, when the Prophet of Allah came, the Persian Empire, Iraq was a part of the Persian Empire. Then the Roman Empire. Noshirwan was known for his justice. Till today, when we read books, we come to know of the justice of this person. Compare his justice with the Nabi of Allah. We're trying to speak about perfection. In an environment, in a society, a tribal community, where people were bloodthirsty. They were ready to take the life of one another on petty issues. Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came, stood in the midst of that and established justice. Think about it. Just think about this. The Battle of Muta. The Battle of Muta took place. Who was the commander, the first commander of the Battle of Muta? The first commander? The adopted son of Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The adopted son, Hazrat Zayd. He dies. He leaves a son behind. Son's name is Usama. So now the army returns back in the leadership of Khalid bin Walid. 3,000 people, they return back. Only 12 people died in the Battle of Muta. So when they return back, something happens in Medina. A wealthy lady by the name of Fatima, she commits theft. She commits theft. She's young, she has not been married yet. And she has committed theft and she has been caught out. Now according to the law, her hand has to be cut off. If she has no hand, who will marry her? All these issues. So now a few companions, they said that who can intercede on behalf of this lady in front of the Nabi of Allah? We're talking about justice. So the Nabi of Allah knew that my adopted son's son, Usama, is hurting. The Nabi of Allah knew this. Everyone knows that Usama bin Zayd is hurting. So they push Usama bin Zayd. They said, if you go to the Nabi of Allah and say that, look, she's a young lady, she committed theft, let her go. You'll get away with it. The environment, the time, timing is everything. So now what happens is, Usama bin Zayd, he starts speaking with the Nabi of Allah, and then he puts this proposal to the Nabi of Allah that she's young and she committed theft, forgive her. And the Nabi of Allah changed. His body language changed. His facial expressions changed. And he said, are you asking me to interfere with the laws of Allah Almighty? This is where the famous statement was made by the Nabi of Allah, that if my daughter Fatima committed theft, I will cut off her hands. Show me justice of that kind. Justice for everyone. For rich and poor. For family members, for non-family members. For men and women, justice for all. And this is one of the maqasid of Sharia, that i'tidal and adl in the entire world. So you could speak about, or people could speak about Noshirwan, the famous Persian king, but you won't find this kind of justice that the Nabi of Allah left behind. This is perfection in justice. This should satisfy the mind. So we spoke about generosity. We've spoken about justice. Now, Plato, the Greek philosopher. Plato, we have heard about Plato, Aflatun. So we use this name in our literature, Plato. And then Socrates, Socrates, Greek philosophers. Greek philosophers. How can they be compared with the Nabi of Allah when till today there are people still spending their entire life trying to understand the statements of the Prophet of Allah. I will speak about this next week in detail, what people have done to preserve the word of the Nabi of Allah. There's been no person in human history that has been studied like the Nabi of Allah, and there's been no effort that can compete with the effort that the predecessors have made in trying to retain and sustain the life of the Nabi of Allah. They wake up in the morning, they go to sleep, and the only thing in their mind is to preserve the life of this one person. This is amazing. Imam Shafi, one night, all night, he studies one hadith. He can't go to sleep. One hadith, one statement. And he deduced 300 rulings from one hadith. And even after deducing 300 rulings from one hadith, the statement is, the ocean is too deep. And I will say that he did not have the lung capacity to dive any further. The ocean is so deep of knowledge. The legacy of the Prophet of Allah is so deep and so rich that each time there's an issue in the world, there's a situation that we face, the solution to it is in a diamond that has not been explored in that ocean. So Allah Almighty then allows one person to have that lung capacity to dive deep and pull out that diamond. We will never be left without guidance because the ocean is so deep. This is the philosophy. This is the hikmat. This is the ilm that Nabi Kareem Muhammad has left behind. His akhlaq. This is a overview. His akhlaq. All the prophets that they came, all the prophets, they worked upon modesty. We find nowadays that communities are devoid of modesty. They have a different understanding of modesty. It's ajib. There was a open day in Sydney, and a person asked a question about zina. Person asked about zina. Is zina forbidden and why it is forbidden? So the Imam, he thought that the response will satisfy him, and he made mention of the story of the Nabi of Allah. I'm talking about the level of modesty. And he said to the audience and the person that posed the question that once a person came to the Nabi of Allah and he said that I want to commit zina. So the Prophet of Allah says that if this act was done with your mother, with your daughter, with your sister, would you like it? And he said no. So this person said, I don't mind. He said, I don't mind. How far, how low have we dropped in terms of modesty? I used to speak to the schools, but you gain experience. I one day said, they said that why can't girls wear skirts? And these are our sisters. This is a girl from the ummah of the Nabi of Allah. It's our responsibility. And I said that, do you think Mary would wear what you are wearing? And she said, yeah. And she was from a Christian school. So in their mind, they feel absolutely satisfied that this kind of dress is okay. The standards have dropped so low. But alhamdulillah, we're not there. And we pray that we never reach that stage. But let's study the haya of the Prophet of Allah. The Sahaba say, what a statesman. The Sahaba say that when we used to look at the face of the Nabi of Allah, if there was anything that was out of line, the Prophet of Allah to speak about, or anything that was against haya, modesty, we could see that the Prophet of Allah was more shy than a virgin girl. This was the haya of the Nabi of Allah. Haya in his eyes, haya in his speech, haya in his body language. Now, a person that has that level of haya, shouldn't we love him by faith and love him intellectually? A person that is so perfect in generosity, shouldn't we love him? If a person is so just, shouldn't we love him intellectually? Think about it. These are small pointers. One of the great qualities that really draws people is tawadu. It is humility. It is humility. Nabi Akrim Muhammad said a lot about humility. I find I've seen people in my life, great scholars, great leaders. And sometimes it is the fault of the followers. They lift the leader so much that the leader feels that he's something. Right? Not even leaders, even sports people. They lift them so much that the sports person in our country thinks that he's God. He behaves like God. No one can touch him. Alhamdulillah, one thing good about the Australian people is they don't lift sports people like this. But in our countries, Allahu Akbar. Huh? They walk on land like they own this land and they are the creators of this land. Think about it. How did the Sahaba treat the Prophet of Allah? But he still remained humble. This is amazing. That think about it. He's making wudu and the water does not drop on the ground. Have you ever thought about it? He's making wudu and the water does not drop on the ground. But still he's humble. What a beautiful insight. What a beautiful insight. When the Sahaba used to sit around him, they could the depiction was that if a bird came, it could sit on any one Sahabi thinking that it was a statue. The Sahabi did not move. Said like this, the bird is deceived, not knowing that this is a living being. It thinks it is a statue. What respect? That kind of respect is on display. Despite that, the Prophet of Allah remains humble. Allahu Akbar Kabira. What a miracle. What a person, what a legacy. If somebody was to give me that respect, I would lose it. I'll behave differently. But this is the Nabi of Allah. The tawadu. He still can sit with a leper and eat with a leper. He still can sit in a society where there are different classes and he can sit with a gharib person, with a poor person, with a destitute person, and he can have food with that destitute person. It's amazing. The tawadu, the humility of Nabi Akrim Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the more I think about the tawadu of the Nabi of Allah, it is because of one reason. Because when you understand who Allah is, you never can think that you're big. Remember this. People that think that they are something, they have not understood who Allah is. They have not understood who Allah is. Once Allah is in front of you and the greatness of Allah Almighty, it does not allow you to lift. The greatness of Allah Almighty, the ma'rifat of Allah Almighty does not allow a person to find himself on any level of kibr and arrogance. So the Nabi of Allah was in the state of ihsan. Allah was in front of him 24/7. How could he rise? That's why he was always humble. This is a characteristic of Nabi Kareem Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Hazrat Anas radiallahu ta'ala, he was the khadim. The mother brought Hazrat Anas and said, Ya Rasulullah, he's your khadim. He was a khadim of the Nabi of Allah for 10 years. That's a long time. 10 years. In 10 years, Hazrat Anas says, the Nabi of Allah never ever scolded me. Never told me off. Sometimes, because I was young, he used to send me to do something. I used to go out and start playing with the boys. The Nabi of Allah is waiting. He comes out and sees that I'm playing. He says, oh, Anas, I sent you. That's it. That's enough. Never scolded. Where are you going to find a person like that? Of that stature, of that level, of that greatness, but so humble. I find that even in my institutes where I studied, if a teacher is a Shaykhul Hadith, if he doesn't get chai that is hot enough, he will throw the chai like this. He's a Shaykhul Hadith. If he doesn't get water of the temperature that of his liking, he will throw the water away. But the Nabi of Allah of that stature. But he's still humble. He still has that level of akhlaq. And the last one for tonight, and then inshallah we'll continue this next week. The bravery of the Nabi of Allah. There have been many great generals, many brave people. in human history. But if we study the life of the Nabi of Allah, when we will study, inshallah, the period of Makkah and the period of Medina, but especially the period of Makkah, it was like walking on eggshells. It was surrounded by fear. You think about it. One person, he stabbed somebody, he stabbed 4 or 5 people in Sydney, and there was fear here. True? There was fear. Well, let's have security for Friday. Let's make 2 people stand outside. And that was only one person. Think about it when you know that the entire community is against you. And they're plotting and planning actively to remove you. But in that environment, you can walk alone to the haram and pray alone. Think about it. What valor, what bravery the Nabi of Allah had. And then, when a person is confronted and he's cornered, it's easy for him to compromise. But he didn't compromise. He did not compromise. Despite so much pressure from the community, that then he made the statement, Lakum deenukum waliya deen. My deen is my deen, your deen is your deen. And in the battle of Hunain, think about it, these are the top Sahaba. It's one of the last battles, the battle of Hunain. This comes after the conquest of Makkah. After the conquest of Makkah. Everyone disperses. Everyone leaves the Nabi of Allah. We'll read about this. Everyone leaves the Nabi of Allah. There's only about 15 to 20 people around the Nabi of Allah. Everyone is left. And the Nabi of Allah stands there alone. And then he reads the one share of his life. Muhaddisun say this is the only share. وَمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ الشِّعْرَ وَمَا يَنْبَغِي لَهُ. That no poetry. There's no poetry from the Nabi of Allah. But if there was one share that he had recited, it was this poet. It was this statement. أَنَا النَّبِي لَا كَذِبْ أَنَا ابْنُ عَبْدُ الْمُطَّلِبِ. He's standing there alone. Arrows flying right, left, center. Sahaba, Khalid bin Walid, these great personalities, all run away. He's standing there alone and he says, I am the prophet. I'm not an imposter. I'm the son of Abdul Muttalib. He can stand there and then everyone comes around the Nabi of Allah. So what we have learned tonight from this first lesson of this beautiful journey about the Nabi of Allah is that the Prophet of Allah has rights upon us. And he will question us about these rights. So what was the first right? We believe in him. Iman in the Nabi of Allah. Alhamdulillah, we say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu. What is the second right? Itaat, obedience of the Nabi of Allah. What was the third right? Nusrat of the deen of the Nabi of Allah. What was the fourth right? The ta'zeem of the Nabi of Allah. And what is the fifth right? That is the core of our program. We want to instill the love of the Nabi of Allah. It is the muhabbat of the Nabi of Allah. Now, how does a person love another person? Because of 3 reasons. Quickly, what are they? Kamal, Jamal and Ihsan. We haven't spoken about Jamal and Ihsan. We'll speak about it maybe next week. But Kamal is number 1. Kamal means perfection. So we gave examples of people that were generous. Who was that person that was generous? Hatim Tai. But his generosity is nothing compared to the generosity of the Nabi of Allah. Man taraka daynan fa'alayya wa man taraka malan faliwarathatihi. He gave to the zahir, he gave to the batin, he gave in this dunya, he gave in akhirah, he gave to the friend, he gave to the foe, so on and so forth. Then we spoke about the hikmat, the ilm of Plato, Socrates, these great personalities. But the Nabi of Allah, so many. This is a topic in itself that we will touch upon next week. The knowledge that the Prophet of Allah has left behind. And people, they're extracting and deducing gems till today. And at the end they say that we have only touched the surface. We have only touched the surface. I came across a tafsir, Sawati'ul Alham. The entire tafsir of the Quran, entire tafsir, commentary of the Quran, and all the letters that have been used without dots. The entire tafsir. Think about it. He hasn't used a ba, he hasn't used a ta, he hasn't used a tha, he hasn't used a jim. He hasn't used a kha. He hasn't used a dhal. He hasn't used a sheen. He hasn't used a za. Only a few letters and he has written the entire tafsir. Mufti Taqi Usmani Saab's brother, I've got the book at home. Al-Hadi Alam is the name of the book. It was written by him in the time of Ziaul Haq. Ziaul Haq gave him 1 lakh rupee as a reward. The entire seerah in Urdu, same alphabet, this entire seerah of the Nabi of Allah, this thick, he has not used 1 letter that has a dot. Hadi Alam. Hadi Alam, there's no dot in this. The entire book, he has only used a few letters from the alphabet. People have done so much work upon the knowledge that was left behind by Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Almighty grant us ability to allow our heart to be filled with the love of Allah and the Rasul, and allow our mind to be satisfied with the love of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now keep in mind, this program is inshallah going to continue for some time. Try to lock this date in, this Monday in. So inshallah, we're going to make it very light, not intellectual. All right, so we want to make it very light so children can understand as well. They can develop the love of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We will go into not too much detail, but enough detail that we can instill the love of Nabi Kareem Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we have made mention that Monday night is a day where people are working. So we have prepared meals. So there will be meals for men and women across the road after the program.